get started here. Quick introductions on myself. So Joey Connect, I'm a senior leader. Oof, senior, not that old, 48. Senior leader with a company called Proteus. We're out of the great state of Nebraska. I've been with the firm 24 years. We've had a lot of fun and a lot of success. So look forward to sharing with you a lot of the things we've learned, and it's not easy, right? That's why you're here, right? Like onboarding is hard, and quite frankly, it's getting harder and harder. And we'll kind of cover some of those things and how they are problems, that hopefully you're experiencing. One caveat I'll put into here: obviously, B2B client onboarding is quite frankly, a broad category. Some of you are in different verticals. Some of you might be product-minded companies, physical, SaaS, professional services. So I do try to cross all the kind of client types and or of that, but thematically a lot of it is the same. Of course, if you have specific questions about something that your group is challenged with, put that in the comments, or at the end I always offer up free consultations for people to just honestly just brainstorm. Sometimes they have a specific problem or challenge or deployment issue that people want feedback. So we're going to get started. So I appreciate everybody's time. As I said, I'm going to pass all this information and resources here at the end. So don't fret. But if you have any specific things that you're working against, go ahead, put that into the comments, and we'll sync back with you at a later point in time to kind of frame kind of what we're going to be covering today. I'm going to click and nothing's going to happen. Now we're getting going. So I always like to kind of frame a little bit. Again, if you're a repeat, how important onboarding is, and I allude to this in many of my presentations, whether it's a webinar like this or other things. How important a good onboarding is nowadays. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. While that's cute and funny, that's true, but also it's about money. And so at the end of the day, business is always about money, customers being happy, staying, growing, buying more from you, etc. And onboarding is getting more and more mission critical to that. So sometimes in these, and again, you'll have all these decks, I always like to start with like the impact, and I'm not going to read these slides to you. You guys know how to do all this, but ultimately it's a seismic impact to the bottom line of your entity. And if you don't believe that, not you on this call, if there are people or leaders within your firm who don't believe that, just start downloading all the resources off of our website and do some of the math and share that with the leadership there. A tremendous amount of churn comes out of obviously sales. And then that time to value. Everybody is impatient as all get out nowadays. And so, about demonstrating value very quickly, they are going to do way more with you more than likely. And you can see the numbers. It's pretty substantial. These are somewhat averages across a lot of industries. Some it's even way more. But in spirit, this is very, very important to the revenue cycle of your company. Extremely. And that's a very important thing, because as a leader or a member of the onboarding team, or maybe that's wrapped under CS in your group, maybe that's wrapped under sales. Every company has their own strategy of where these things are. It's a critical, especially, let's be frank, right now, the economy is a little bit slow, and companies are trying to do more with less. And so the more and more you can align yourself and or your department with value of the organization and revenue and anything of that nature, obviously, is pretty important, obviously, for retain and growth. So I like to share these things, because sometimes when we talk about onboarding, we're talking about, okay, we just, requirements and how to do this and kind of the tactical thing. On most of my presentations, I also try to weave in some of the economic and the business and or the psychology elements of onboarding also, because they're equally as important as you start to build a complete group and a rounded out group. Whether you're going to only have 2 total in your entire team forever, cool beans, or you're going to have 150 in 9 languages, awesome. The common theme across that is success, and we're going to kind of walk through those today. Some of these are Johari windows. Some of these, quite frankly, you might already know, but hopefully some of the tactics on how to solve them. I keep losing my click for some reason. There we go. This slide is in every single presentation. I always say that in every, so if you're a repeat again, sorry, you've seen this one, but I really like this one for kind of, it visualizes kind of the true um, problem basically that is going on, which is kind of the underlying issue, right? So all of you probably have been working for more than a few years now. Some of you, like me, OG, been around for a bit. Like the complexity in onboarding is astronomical now. Not only within your own firm, siloing in all sorts of people, not only onto the client that you're onboarding, siloing in all sorts of people, and kind of herding the cats during this process. For some of you, that starts at the end of the sales process, right? The handoffs might be rough for you and you're looking for solutions there and challenges around that. Then the actual onboarding process, right? And communication and collaborating and collecting data, you name it, you guys are all there, right? All of those challenges. And many of you I know have been in some of our webinars, which are about if you're really a growth company or you're really focused on scaling your current clients, like a cross-sell ecosystem, you're going to onboard the same client multiple times, sometimes in a year and or over the next 3 years. So it's not just one onboarding, it's like continuous onboarding. And so there's a lot of demands put on your team and your organization, and it's extremely complex, right? There's just a crap ton of people, crap ton of herding the cats, the old Super Bowl commercial, right? And so this environment is really one of the key drivers to air quote a lot of the challenges, that the 5 challenges we're going to discuss today. Are there more than 5 challenges? Of course. I'm just trying to group them into actionable kind of takeaways for you guys. Again, if you have some challenges on your end or you think I'm not covering the right ones, throw it in there. I read them all and I'll throw it in another presentation. So the environment, I think everybody kind of understands, but it's a key driver, right? Like a lot of times when we're trying to do business improvement, a lot of times in our companies, right, or or in your own processes, right? Sometimes you're looking at the symptom, it's not the root cause. It's the whole Eastern Western medicine kind of conversation where in America we like to just take pills and cover up a lot of things, where other countries and parts of the world might look at the source problem and try to solve that first, right? So that whole Eastern Western medicine kind of approach, I frequently use that logic or conversation as we talk about these things, right? So this is one of the root problems that is generating a lot of the challenges to which we're going to talk about today, and that is just 100% correct and consistent. It just really is. All right. So enough about that. Let's still in here. So a reality check. So, and I'm not saying this is you guys. I always have to be very careful because clearly you're out there looking for improvements and trying to drive things. But in many organizations where they're identifying a tremendous amount of problems, onboarding is kind of just a to do to get done. And there really isn't a strategy around it to really organize for success and really look at it as a critical business function of the organization. You kind of have the two sides of the house. The more popular one, we'll call it, is sales, right? Sales, everybody, let's get sales, right? And then you have account management. And I'm keeping this simple. Everybody knows there's thousands of different titles nowadays involved in all this, but I think everybody knows where I'm going. And then somewhere in the magical middle, the client becomes a client, and that's us. That's the onboarding, right? And so sometimes that's just a a checkbox on the board, or the team will it will happen magically. The magically will be a handoff. There'll magically be an onboarding, and they'll magically going to kick out the other side extremely happy with what sales sold them. And it's not that simple. I hope some of you are laughing, or maybe some are crying, and I didn't mean to do that to you. But the point being, I'm joking, of course. The point being is when it's not considered mission critical, a lot of bad things can happen. And of course, they're on the screen here, right? And so when it is just a small consideration and not a strategic consideration, and as you know, many companies now are using their onboarding as a strategic advantage of their entire organization to be able to drive home value very, very quickly, right? And in simplistic terms, that might even be from a B2C perspective, like an Apple store, right? Like, why is the Apple Store so popular? Well, because you get onboarded very quickly. You spend a crap ton of money and voila, you're seeing benefits before you even leave the building, right? And so those are little things like that that obviously have to be extrapolated into the B2B ecosystem, which is always, it seems like decades behind the B2C experience, right? So the reality check is again, you probably heard or got the theme from the beginning of the conversation that we take this very seriously, right? And that it can dramatically affect profitability of the organization and success of your team. So we're going to jump in here, and I've aggregated to 5 challenges, and we're going to kind of go through these. And I'm probably going to Chuck Willery everybody on this one. So we'll do 2 and 2, and then 1 on this kind of process, because I want to talk about the challenge, and then I also want to kind of show and bring some things to life. Again, clearly we have a very successful product that solves these problems, but some of you might just be looking for a little thing to add to your experience or something. So I'm very candid in these conversations about trying to provide takeaway items that immediately tonight, tomorrow, when you meet with your team, you might inject those concepts into there. Okay. So I look at it from this perspective, kind of teaching and sharing a lot of our war stories that we've been through or have obviously helped clients sign. All right. So we're going to bounce into all 5 of these. We'll Chuck Woolery them, and then we'll kind of go from there. If you're not familiar with Chuck Woolery, Love Connection for some of you OGs on this call like myself, great show from back in the day. All right, so let's jump in. So the first one that we're going to kind of attack here, and this is kind of how I like to look at things, and communicate things out. Bear with me if you hate this style. Comment in the comments. That's fine. It's all right. But I like to be short and sweet, and then we talk about a little bit. So the problem, kind of the pain, right, and then the impact. And don't forget, these slides will all be shipped out to everybody. And then kind of how do we solve this? And then I always like quotes. And because in onboarding, frequently this is talked about. Like, we'll just have another meeting with the client. We'll just have another meeting with the client. We'll get it aligned. Meetings, no. Like, they actually want way less meetings if possible, right? So some of you, I think, are laughing there. And so aligning is not about meeting. And especially if there's no actionable items out of the meetings, then you're just meeting for the sake of having meetings. And I think all of you on this call would say you have too many meetings already, right? But let's jump back up. I digress. Let's go back up. So the challenge of misalignment here, kind of the underlying problems here, sometimes they start in sales originally, and I'm not being negative against sales, it's just reality. There might be some misalignment there. Then there might be some misalignment in the handoff process, right? So there's kind of missed expectations or not clearly kind of communicated there, right? So that can cause a lot of problems for organizations. And then, of course, as they get into the onboarding, the actual expectations are completely misaligned, right? And so that's the driver of the problem, right? So this is where behind the scenes there's some friction going on because the outcomes aren't real clear. There's just challenges around it, right? And you probably know when you have that feeling, right? Because it's not as seamless as you thought it might be. On that kickoff call, you're having some kind of challenges of, we're here for this and this and that, right? And you know what I'm getting at. Everybody knows that kind of, what I call that reduced trust there. Like, that's kind of some you can feel it already, right? It's palpable in the room, right? And so, yeah, you all know what I'm saying, right? And so we're going to talk about this a little bit in the kind of the solution side a little bit more. I'm going to cover, related to this one of the big drivers related to this is more this. So the missed expectation in general is the concept of everybody knows what their role is and what the expectations are. And reality is most of the time your new client, okay, trying to make sure we frame this correctly here, but your new client, because you guys are like, awesome, we know what we're doing, we're onboarding, let's get company ABC up and going. Their perception coming into this are mostly the things on the right. Okay. So in many cases, and I mean this with great respect to everybody in the call, they're not excited, because you know how it is. Like they're all saying we're super busy already and we don't need another tool, we don't need another project, whatever your service is, right? So there's going to be a lot of kind of friction there. And then in many cases, let's be transparent, sometimes these initiatives have been kind of sold to leadership teams. And now when you're rolling it out, AKA onboarding it into the organization, it's a whole different team of people. And so for many of you, you're lacking sometimes the re-education process. So what we see is a lot of times something will get bought, but as you start to onboard, they don't even understand why we're even doing what we're doing, right? And so a lot of the times when I'm talking with some companies that are challenged with their onboarding, it's because they're actually, I don't want to call it reselling again, but it's more about the education of the why and some of the other things around that. Does that make sense? Hopefully for some of you this resonates, because sometimes the onboarding, it's like immediate, like send us this, da da da, and the groups don't even know why we're even doing this. What's the benefit, to us, all of these things. And then there's a lot of emotional kind of things on the side. I'm just sharing these because they're real. And so you can say, well, not on our product. I get it. But for the larger group or professional services, whatever it might be, there's a lot of fear, and they're very, very guarded about the success or failure of what's being asked of them because they don't want to look bad in their own organization. Does that make sense? So there's misalignment, but the misalignment fear or concepts are kind of driving from a lot of these indicators. So these are things to think about, definitely in those wicked kind of, especially if you have a tremendous long sales cycle. So there's a lot of relationship built there, a lot of like said things, right? You guys all know what I'm talking about. So this is kind of a big piece of kind of the misalignment drivers. And I'm gonna share in a second. I told you we're gonna do 2 and 2 and then 1 so we can get to 5. I probably should have just done 4 things, right? Would have been a lot smoother here. But so we're gonna misalignment. We're gonna move on now to lack of visibility, and then I'm gonna step out of the PowerPoint and kind of show you just environmentally how some ideas on how you might do this. I'm not going into product demos. I can tell you that. If you want a product demo, sign up on the website. I like to bring some of these concepts together, and I'll expand that. Okay. So next one is the lack of visibility. Okay. So this is kind of where, and many of you kind of know where I'm going here. It's not a genius statement, lack of visibility, but the symptoms of it are kind of where you start to, again, try to really solve the problem, right? Like, oh, we missed this deadline, blah, 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 or the client does it a little wheezy because of the earlier things, right? These are the challenges that a lot of groups have with the lack of visibility, especially if you're doing multiple onboardings at a time, or it's really a complicated onboarding. You're deploying stuff into healthcare, financial services, banking, whatever, any kind of very, um, yeah, any complicated ecosystem. And the one that I think is the most is the reactive firefighting. Um, is that's when you can kind of tell from your own team, if you're a leader of it, it feels like, man, we're just always trying to fix problems, right? Or catch up, or where did that come from? On your Tuesday meeting, everything was great with the client, but on your Friday meeting, everything's not. Like, why are we getting this inconsistency of expectation management, right? And so lack of visibility on kind of where the clients are at and how they're progressing. I like to think of it as internal milestones of the client. They're not necessarily publicly facing to the client. There should be. We'll talk about that in a second to manage that visibility, but then also internally, like, how are we progressing? Kind of by now we should be here kind of things, right? Those kinds of things. It doesn't mean there aren't going to be problems. A tagline we always joke about in our enterprise is, like Smokey the Bear. Like I say Smokey the Bear all the time. And it's like, if you see something, smoke before it becomes fire, or if you see something, say something, right? Like that kind of stuff, because there's no doubt going to be blowups or fires or smoke. You just want to catch it fast. It's time, time to reaction is what really matters, right? And so some of you, I know these operational things, you just want to have visibility, but a lot of times you have to have things centralized to do that, right? You need infrastructure more than likely to do this successfully, hence why you guys are here today, right? You're trying to figure out, what is the environment? If I had an environment that I could obviously reduce the misalignment and create better visibility on that, that would be stronger for my firm, right? And everybody knows that quote, you can't improve what you can't see. 101, right? We're very big. Our actual whole business model with our clients is built on incremental growth and phases of it, because we don't just sell software. We also are a team that helps you kind of build all this stuff out and really refine it, benchmark all sorts of things. That's what we do, because it's onboarding itself is really only about 45% technology. It's the processes and the experiences and all the other things wrapped around that, which we help our clients with. So we recognize that just throwing a piece of software at something typically causes more problems than benefit. Okay. So the second challenge point is the lack of visibility in the ecosystem. So before I jump to number three, I just want to share a couple of kind of things that are very passionate, not only to me, but our enterprise and our clients. Right. And so this is our product Engage. You probably know, you've been on our website, I'm sure, at some point in time. And I'm not getting into a product demo here, but one of the things we are adamant about with clients is creating these experiences and using what we call a mutual plan engine to drive that. Right. And these mutual plan engines are basically setting clear expectations for you and the client, both sides of the equation. It's mutual, right? I have to stress that all the time, right? And then there's internal tasking, and there are also things that the client needs to do. But laying out a clear vision map for them of the expectation management on both sides. This is where, if there is misalignment, you're going to find it fast and be able to change these out accordingly to do that and maybe solve that problem permanently moving forward, right? This also helps with the lack of visibility, right? Because having everything centralized, laying out a plan, assigning it to the appropriate people within the ecosystem creates those verbal contracts, that verbal accountability. And of course, all of this can be used clearly for reporting and progress management, right? But this is very, very, very important kind of concept that we really help a lot of our partners with, and you obviously can steal a lot of the ideas from today. But this is two-sided. This is not only for your team internally. Many aspects here don't show up to the customer. Only the things you want to show to the customer sit there. Another kind of critical, because you're trying to find problems on the misalignment, right? So when you're misaligned, that misalignment kind of comes from something at some point in time got us a little sideways. So one, laying out the whole plan, testing, all this stuff, like really the experience. This use case here is probably more for technology. Clearly, we do this on all kinds of ecosystem. But another critical piece of this is, yes, laying out that plan for them, all right? But then it's also trying to really probe and unearth any other challenges. And again, if you're a repeat, you know where I'm going here. It's a concept I personally love too. So I have two personal loves, my mutual plans and this concept of pre-mortem. So you're all very familiar with post-mortem. The thing I hate about post-mortem is it's post. It's too late. And so we really appreciate and really try to drive many of our clients to do those pre-mortems where you're asking your client during your kickoff and your initial meetings, like, if this were to go sideways, this onboarding, where do you see that would be? Right. And the simple question like that, and there's many other ways you can frame that, oh, it starts to open up dialogue between you and the customer and creates opportunities for that. And like a stupidly low hanging one is, you're like, okay, the onboarding looks like this is going to take 4 months to onboard you, whatever, whatever, whatever. And then somebody on the other side, when you ask that question, is like, oh, do you know Tiffany is going to be out? Tommy's going to be out. Tommy's going to be in Taiwan for 2 months. So he's going to be like, all of a sudden, everybody's telling you everything. And you're like, okay, let's adjust our plan. Or IT isn't available until this, right? Because IT integrations, if they're needed. Like, what it does is it creates a mutual open communication channel that these mutual plans then could be tweaked based on both sides, because the client doesn't know what they don't know. We say that a trillion times. They don't know what's coming. So help open up what's coming so that you can openly talk about it and make adjustments accordingly. If you really want to hammer down, you want to take it one more step further. Some of our clients, including, yeah, quite a few now, also do what we call an onboard score, which means in their kickoff meeting, they actually, prior to it, are asking the client, do you have all this stuff kind of high level? And then after that, they score the client internally, and they really don't onboard the client until the client says, yeah, we have all of this now. Now we want to start our official onboarding. Does that make sense, folks? So it's like a pre-onboarding to take a temperature on, okay, when is the best time to onboard? And you might be like, wow, that's pretty aggressive. Reality is it saves your company and the client's company a ton of money. Plus, you get your time to value where you want it to be, and they see the value. And the timing just wasn't a good time right now for them to onboard you. And so the risk of your deployment failing goes higher. Net net, you're in way better shape. If you're publicly traded, you can work around obviously your quarterly results. There's a lot of things to do here that kind of all work into that. So that's a real aggressive way if you want to do it too. We highly recommend it, especially because an onboarding goes sideways, all the things we just talked about there, right? At the beginning slides, the risk to the enterprise. Okay. Making sense, everybody? I like to just show because again, it's more collaborative, creating visibility, all these kinds of things within that. All right. They're telling me to carry on. Production, the directors are. Next slide. Number 3, balancing efficiency and resourcing. So this clearly is a challenge for some of you, maybe even more so now. Maybe you've had staff augmentations or you're a startup with limited resources. I mean, there's a trillion reasons, or you're just trying to be super efficient in what you're doing. And so the expectation that has been passed down to you or by you, naturally driven, is to have a white glove onboarding service, right? But that's hard. And for many of you, um, you have lots of different what I would call client types, verticals, or industries, right? So maybe you're selling into hospitals and healthcare. Yeah, that's the same. Hospitality, hotels. I'm now hospitality, hotel. How about I come up with a different industry when I have two going next to each other? Okay. Uh, now this is awesome. Software and hospitality, two different. Okay, there you go. Good job, Joe. So with that spirit, it's really hard to be bespoke to basically each one, right? But that's very, very important. And you saw that the next challenge 4, is personalization. And so they kind of work hand in hand, right? Everybody wants to be super personalized, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but everybody's trying to be super efficient, right? And so what that comes down to is, for many of our clients, one of the things we help them is kind of tiering their enterprise, A, B's, and C's, right? Like there I have enterprise and SMB, small business, right? So that you can do all your proper templating, because you want to create these highly reproducible environments, clearly, right? And you also want to make it so that you can measure the experiences for obviously your continued improvement, but then also underlying, once they're segmented like that, we can help clients do a tremendous amount of automations. And so we always like to say, okay, in our ecosystem, for every one thing you literally do, the tool does 10 for you, right? And so that's really where you can get the exponential balancing act of efficiency on your resources, but also not diminishing the impact to the customers, right? Because that's real critical. And that's kind of what the statement underneath, I kind of, again, why I like these statements, is it's not brutal automation where you're never going to talk to them, because we actually talk to many clients when they come to us. Actually, they're like, we fully automated kind of maybe too much because we're having a lot of churn, because they great teams know that it's a lot of onboarding is also coaching. So at the beginning it's education, why are we here and what benefits, and then a lot of it comes into coaching. And like I said, our business model, we coach forever basically on it, because it's always evolving. And then you always have all these other verticals and use cases, et cetera, et cetera. But the point being is, we automate to optimize basically the efficiency of the team, so that their time can then be used for the coaching and optimization of everything else with the client, right? And that's a critical thing to kind of be thinking about as you're taking your journey map down, obviously solving these challenges. It's a balanced scorecard. It's not full automation, probably never really works, especially in more complicated. It works obviously if you're signing up for like constant contact or something like that, right? But everybody kind of knows what I mean. And then you gotta kind of have to segment by those. And then typically you're going to want to be measuring your TTV and elements around that, right? Your time to value by type, enterprise and SMB. You can't be comparing them, right? You can't be comparing a lot of things to your core metrics. So you have to think about that. But the templating alone, the reminders, all this stuff like with the mutual plan and all the other things, can really make the team very, very efficient, and highly personalized to the unique experiences, that are desired there. So that leads in kind of very classically to personalization at scale, right? So the client doesn't want to feel like, wow, like half of these questions don't make sense to me because, oh, here's a classic one. Like we have a lot of finance and so to many of you on this call, it might not sound like a big difference, but if you call a credit union a bank or bank a credit union, not good. And so even down to phraseology, common language, the different roles, ROLES, that are involved, is a very big thing, because when you're onboarding, you're frequently segmenting by teams or other responsibilities that are in an ecosystem. And so personalization isn't just, oh, they're this, and so we share them two case studies. No, the complicated layers that can come out of that. It's what systems you're integrating with. What's common in banking is different than credit unions, which is different than healthcare, right? And so as you build out your different experiences, the level of personalization is by industry, and then sometimes even by persona type or people, like the CFO of a financial system or whatever. And so these playbooks can become pretty dynamic and pretty robust, making the client feel like, man, all you guys must do is onboard banks because this is so customized, feels speaks our language, the challenges, right? All of this, but what it really is it's deposits, no pun intended, over time, honing at the strategy and the interactions and engagements you're going to be doing, right? And so that's a very big piece of it. And I frequently call this kind of the Kia, which is unbelievable vehicles now. I'm 48. But when I first started this, like, it's the Kia, the Camry, and then the Cadillac, right? So we like to start simple, but over time, if you're structured correctly, you can build out all of this bespoke, feel bespoke, using templates. Like our infrastructure has all these all sorts of things to obviously drive these strategies, which makes it super efficient when you're onboarding, to basically, from your CRM, it says, oh, we're onboarding a bank or a hospital. It just automatically then creates a hospital experience or a bank experience. You get the point. But to do that, you can't just sit down and be like, let's go do it. It typically is a process over time, right? To kind of drive that. And it's the same thing with optimizing your efficiency. It's a process over time to obviously drive that, right? And those are kind of the critical parts, is because the more it 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 looks like it's for them, the bigger they have the trust, which I talked about earlier, which is a huge component, obviously, of onboarding. It's, again, the first piece, education, kind of learning it, right, and then moving through the different phases, post that. I'm not gonna share, but of course our platform has all sorts of components and libraries and templates and all sorts of things, email template, all the way down to like little micro things, DMing you can do in the tool, all can be templated so that the rep can just quickly do it and centralize it all, which is critical. Okay. So you're kind of getting a thematical approach here, right? So the first misalignment, got to get our horses aligned here, right? Got to get them aligned, got to have some visibility on that. Then we got to be efficient in what we're doing, right? And then we also, in order to be successful and really deemed valuable to the client, it also has to feel like it's tailored to them, right? So it just felt highly tailored, right? And so the last but not least, you kind of probably have an idea where we're going, is, well, I said it earlier, so if you were listening, it's ROI. And um so ROI. So let's unpack this bad boy for a little bit. Personally, my favorite statement is the one at the bottom. When onboarding speaks the language of revenue, it earns executive investment. Ponder that for a little bit. Yep, exactly. And so I say, instead of being squiggly lined, dotted lined, be a direct line to revenue, and your challenges, needs, and efforts will be talked about, looked at, funded, whatever it might be. And so steal away all of that. But we are very, as onboarders, we are very cognizant of the key criteria, time to value, time on I mean, everybody knows. If you're not familiar and you're new to the hustle, if you go to our website, I'll share it. Like we have about 13 metrics we really dig into when we're working with clients. Those metrics are not all for executive leadership. What they are is to thermometers for different use cases and timing and things to better provide you with strong concepts and ideas for how to align some of your team members' approaches, what templating, all the stuff that we were talking about, the Kia, the Camry, the Cadillac. These are all like operational metrics that we work with clients on. So they all combine. Obviously, time to value is a big one. Many of you know that time to value has been um, kidnapped by the phrase live, LIVE, and that is not good. Live is not time to value. And so a lot of people will try to tell you, we got them up live and or time to value 22 days. And then you call the customer. Are you guys even using the tool yet? Nope. 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 We haven't even used it yet. Have you gotten any value? Nope. So how is the TV time to value 22 days? It's not. And that's the myth. And that gets a lot of companies into challenges. It harkens me back to the old innovation days with minimum viable product, right? And everybody was creating these products, and they're like, yeah, we got this product, and it was an MP, minimum product, but not valuable, right? Like there was no value. Like it didn't give you any ROI, right? So we always would joke is like an MVP without the V is just an MP, right? And so same thing here with time to value. Time to value infers the customer's getting value. Retention rate, of course, expansion within that customer. All of these things live and drive a lot of the times out of the initial onboarding group. And then, of course, for some of you, professional services and others, this is reoccurring, right? You finished project one, you're now on to project two, project three, project four. We actually, for many of our clients, use the onboarding process to capture enough data to figure out the next 1 to 2 years cross-sell strategy. Think about that. Think about that revenue line item to your VP of sales or your CRO, right? During the onboarding, you're getting intimate with the client. You're getting to learn and know them way deeper than sales ever could because sales was still working on a specific problem set. Now you're getting to know the client at so many deeper levels. Your onboarding process can generate, especially in quite a few professional services areas, technology areas, others, literally the onboarding process architected correctly. Here are the 7 other things we should be selling them because they are telling us all of their problems and we're seeing those problems. Think about that for your org. What's the value of that? Right? How does that elevate your guys' experience of the onboarding process and cha-ching, direct line to revenue? And so I'm adamant about helping connect those pieces and dots because the ROI is not only in bringing them in right, and securing it, it's how much more can we provide value to them. And it's not selling, it's value. It's not selling. Tell me, 3 problems that, we found these 3 problems. It's cha-ching. And that's very, very good for you and your team, for your part in the community and in the company and the value of your team, and again seeking additional investments and other things that you might be. So I always like to talk about that because I know sometimes onboarding isn't considered financial, but it is, and that's the brutal reality, and we have to talk about that more because it's that critical of a part of the enterprise. Plus it can be generating. Off the record, I was talking with the CRO of an organization, not going to name anything, whatever, but basically this was the majority of our conversation was he knew that during certain phases of X and Y, onboarding could really help them cross sell other because their product was a type of product, but they were part of a bigger global kind of group. and they were just leaving so much money on the table because they weren't asking the right questions during onboarding, right? And so he had connected the dots that onboarding is mission critical, not only for the service bought, but the services to be bought, right? And think about that in your own environment and own ecosystem. And if you want to brainstorm or like how the hell do you do that? It's just like I was talking about the pre-mortem, right? There's all these little techniques that when woven into onboarding can be exponentially more valuable in the outcomes or the value set of the customer over time, right? In a 2 to 3 year period, what is it? So we're running up. I always like to try to make mine about 40 minutes. Um, I know some people have to leave at the bottom of the hour, so they're out. But again, we'll share all accordingly. But the quick self assessment, some of the things to think about. Are your teams aligned? Clearly, we got a lot of siloed issue that we help a lot of people with. Can you measure the TTV? Don't forget the V. Is your onboarding process visible across teams? We have a lot of that stuff that we're trying to help where there's multi teams on both sides. Obviously, the personalization and automation is extremely, clear. And can you quantify the ROI? This and I talked about many different concepts and numbers that could be used in those ROIs. And of course, there's more resources on our site. But the spirit that I wanted to get across, yes, there are 5 big challenges that are out there, but the good news, and I always try to think of this, and everybody here is in business, obviously, is when you're looking at problems, there's 2 ways to look at problems or challenges. One, external, not in your control. Two, in your control. And I always like to focus on the things that are in our control, because you and your team can meet about them this week and start to incrementally over time really solve these problems. And so always stay focused if you can on all the concepts we just talked about, the things that we can control fast, we can make changes, we can measure, and we can become a more optimized and optimal team from that perspective. So with that said, I appreciate everybody's time. Everybody knows our efficiencies. It's across the board. We get a ton of benefit in many different areas. But as I mentioned, one of the things that I'm fine with doing is if anybody has specific challenges or Joe, how would this work for a blank kind of company? We're challenging doing this or X, Y, Z. I mean, we literally have government clients. We have clients in all industries. Um, schedule a time. I'll include that on. It's a personal one-on-one. You tell me what you're working against, and I'll try to figure out if a use case that we've done that was successful and try to help you build more value. So again, appreciate everybody's time. We'll package this up here. Check out, we got many more. We do almost 1 or 2 a week. A lot of people interested in these challenges. So again, I appreciate everybody's time. And yeah, we'll talk next time. Appreciate it, everybody. Thanks.